My name is Arlene Herson. The name of the show is Getting to Know You, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Tonight we're going to get to know an amazing man, a man no jail can hold. He has broken out of 28 of them. A man who is hung over Niagara Falls upside down, handcuffed, and in a straitjacket. A man who holds 2 world records, one for being sealed in a coffin for 2 hours and 2 minutes, the other for remaining frozen in ice for 44 minutes. Truly amazing. He is none other than the amazing Randi himself, and let's get to know him. Welcome.
Ta-da! I love your announcement there.
Okay.
I didn't know it was all that great.
Yeah, oh, well, I haven't even touched on all the things that you've done.
I must correct you
actually.
on one small thing.
Okay, yes.
Because after all, in my business, I want to be absolutely correct. I claim the impossible. So when I hear something like what you just said, I must correct you. It's a very small point, but you can't have handcuffs on at the same time you're in a straitjacket. See, in a straitjacket, you have your arms encased in canvas, and you're like this. And
okay.
the hangover in Niagara Falls was just in a straitjacket. But that's close enough.
Okay, but other times you've been handcuffed, and other times you got out of handcuffs.
So many times.
And we're going to talk about that, but a little later in the show, because now I want to talk about you, Randi, the person before you became a magician. You are one of the best-known magicians in the world.
Not the richest, but one of the best known. Yes.
Right. And before audiences all the time, I find it hard to believe that as a child, you were shy and afraid of people.
Yeah, well, Arlene, I made up my mind when I was about 17. I remember I was up in Toronto, Canada, that's where I was born, and I looked in the mirror in the bathroom. I stood there and I looked at myself and I said, look, this has got to stop. I had a complex. I was afraid of meeting new people. I used to blush and stammer and all kinds of things like that, and I made up my mind that it was time to stop all that nonsense, and that I had to get out and I had to deal with the rest of the world. I was going to live in this world for the rest of my life and had to deal with people. I wasn't going to go into a cave and put the loincloth and a turban on and tell fortunes. So I went out and joined a carnival. And from that moment on, I was in front of the public and have been ever since. And you may have noticed I've gotten over this shyness.
Yes,
rather well.
I see. Okay. Well, you forced yourself to. You forced yourself to perform and to be in front of people. But before you joined the carnival, you were a very gifted child. You had an extraordinary IQ. I've heard that you even had to stay out of school for 2 years at one point because you were so bright and so far ahead of the teachers.
Yeah, that's fundamentally the reason. But actually, a better explanation perhaps is that there wasn't any way of handling gifted children. When I was a kid up in Canada, you just didn't have a way of accommodating gifted children. There were no special programs for gifted children. No one really understood them. And I was always in a class with kids at least 1.5 feet taller than I was, and they used to beat me up regularly, which wasn't one of my favorite pastimes. And I found that I had to just drop out of school, and I studied all kinds of obscure things.
Like what?
Well,
Okay.
I got interested in integral and differential calculus, and I was fascinated with the discovery, because calculus is an absolutely remarkable discovery of man. And people who haven't experienced some knowledge of that kind of mathematics, I think, have really missed something in life. It's magical almost.
Okay, well, I think a lot of us, I've missed it, but that certainly isn't what the average child in grade school
True.
is going to study when he's out of school. How old were you at that time?
I guess at that time I would be 12, 13 or so, 11 to 13, I guess. And I don't know exactly what years I didn't attend in grade school. You see, in Canada, we had 5 years of high school. And that last year, that 5th year, was equivalent to 1 year of college in New York and New Jersey. And I dropped out of high school. Actually, I finished all high school, and I went to write the final examinations. And the first examination was English literature. I'll never forget it. We had taken the play Macbeth by some chap named Shakespeare, I believe. And as a matter of fact, that year in the school play, I played the part of Macbeth. And I didn't have the beard at that time, so it wasn't quite the casting you might think. And the first question was, prove by reference to the play Macbeth that Macbeth was not responsible for his downfall, but rather that his wife was responsible. And I just wrote across the paper, this is a premise I cannot support, and I stood up and left the room, and I never went back to write those examinations the rest of them.
Okay, so you were such a gifted and bright child, you never graduated from high school.
No, I never did, really.
And you became a success.
Well, that's not impossible, after all. In fact, in days like these, I meet a lot of young fellows, you know, that are determined. They've been told by their parents, you must have a college education. Frankly, in the world that we live in today, it's my opinion, from my experience, that technical skills and technological abilities can often give you just as much, if not more, than college educations will. I know college graduates that are working in Macy's selling notions behind a counter and just can't get a job. I know one fellow that has a master's degree in international economics and whatnot, and the man is absolutely out of a job. He's been working in a brokerage firm as an errand boy for the last 2 years. So one wonders about this education
right.
thing.
I agree. Okay, and you had tremendous life experience, which could not have been reproduced in any school. At 17, you mentioned you did join the Carnival.
I did,
okay.
yes.
What was that like? Was it terrific? Was it exciting? I mean, every kid wants to leave home and join the Carnival. What happened?
No good. It was simply terrible. It was dreadful. I must say I suffered a great deal during that. It was Peter March's traveling circus, I remember, and I got clawed by a lion and almost permanent scars to show you for it. Right over the right kidney, as a matter of fact, a lot of fun. And I got rained out, we got flooded out a couple of times. I was arrested and thrown in jail with everybody else on the Carnival overnight for not having a license to operate in town. At that time I was Prince Ibis. I had a 10-in-1 show with Carl Henderson, intrepid explorer of the South American jungles, the indigo constrictor snake, who was absolutely harmless. He was more afraid of us than we were afraid of it. And we had Kung Lee, the electric boy. That's an interesting story. We weren't allowed to advertise in the paper for an Oriental boy that we needed for the show. So we pulled a gimmick. We went to Chinatown and we advertised in the Chinese newspaper. The only people who could read that would be Chinese, you see. And we got a Chinese kid just like that. And he was Kung Lee, the electric boy. We almost electrocuted him one night. I'll never forget that. He'll never forget it either, I don't think. And we had quite a show going, but it was terrible. It was a very, very hard life. I spent 2 years at it, but actually I wouldn't take 1 hour of it back, because it taught me not only how to meet audiences and deal with audiences, but it taught me how to meet and deal with the toughest audiences possible. You pay 50 cents to get into a tent, you want 50 cents worth. In those days, that was a lot of money, and you had to produce for those people no matter what.
Yeah, and you did.
I did, yes, indeed.
But there was a time now, if you were with the Carnival for 2 years, you had an accident. You had mentioned that you broke your back.
Mm-hmm.
Was that when you were 19? Had you left the Carnival? Was that before the
I
Carnival?
was almost 19. I was just under 19, and frankly, at that point, I had left the Carnival for the season, and I had a job with an office. I was on a bicycle. I was struck by a car, flipped up in the air, broke my back in 2 places, and for a year and a half after that, in fact, a little more than a year and a half, I was in a cast from here to here. And I lost 40-something pounds while I was in that cast. A terrible experience. I used to faint regularly just from the exhaustion of it.
Okay, but you supported yourself painting signs, you
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah.
You lived in the Y for $6.50 a week. You knew how to survive. You're a survivor. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I guess we're all survivors. We make it more or less desperately, but I think we're all survivors. I think
Yeah.
everyone finds that ability.
We have to take a break right now, and then we'll come back and hear more about surviving and magic. We're talking with the amazing Randi, and we'll be right back after these messages, so please stay right there. We're back with my very special guest, the amazing Randi.
Ta-da.
Gee, I had trouble pronouncing that word.
Yeah, well, that must
That's
be
a hard word.
my
guest.
presence is probably overpowering.
Right, well, hearing about all the amazing things that you've done. Actually, we were talking about you leaving home at 17.
Yep.
And the things that happened to you, and they all weren't terrific. How did your parents react to a young boy leaving home and going especially to join the Carnival?
Well, in those days, I don't think leaving home at 17 was all that startling. My father was with the telephone company, and he wanted me to become a telephone company executive, of course, and bewailed the fact that I didn't go on to college. But I guess they had to more or less be satisfied with it. They moved off to Montreal, and I stayed back in Toronto, Canada, and got working at nightclubs and did wonderful things. I got huge money, like $55 a week in some cases when I was really lucky. And I struggled my way through it, got to know all the agencies, and finally I got called down to New York. I was 21 years of age, I guess, at that time, to do a show called It's Magic, now since long defunct, and it was a black and white show with Paul Tripp as the MC, and I was featured on the last program of the series. I don't know whether that's an ominous fact or not, but it was wonderful because I really effectively stayed in the States ever since. I'm now a permanent resident, and I must say that I am most beholden to the United States. I'm still a citizen of Canada, though a permanent resident of the States, and it's done wonderful things for me. There's no other country on earth where I could have had these opportunities.
Yeah, well, the United States is delighted to have you, too. You have made your home right here in Remsen, New Jersey,
I have, yes.
in an absolutely terrific house, I must say, which has skeletons, a secret door, lots of animals, lots of love, and as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about that a little later in the show, because I
All
want
right.
to go back to your starting as a magician again now.
Yeah.
You did start out very young. Who was it, once you did get to the States, who was it that influenced you
Well,
the most?
When I came to New York City, I knew that Harry Blackstone Sr., the old man now since deceased, he was living in New York, and I actually picked up a phone book and went into the phone book. By golly, there he was listed in the phone book. I called him up and he invited me over to the Royalton Hotel immediately, and we hit it off very well. And of course, he'd been my idol since I was so high. I saw him first when I was 12 years of age. I saw him at the Royal Alexander Theatre in Toronto, Canada, and he made a lady float up into the air. When I saw her go up, I made up my mind. I said, look, there are only two possibilities. Either this is mass hypnosis, or the man knows something that I don't know, and anybody can do it. I came to the second conclusion. I was quite correct. And from the moment that I met Blackstone, because there's so many magicians named Harry. Harry Keller, Harry Blackstone, Harry Houdini, all of these people named Harry. Sometimes hard to keep them apart, but Houdini was dead 2 years before I was born, so it was impossible for me to meet him, and Harry Blackstone was certainly the next best thing, and he became a very good friend of mine. He was a marvelous man, a real gentleman, and a great scholar.
Okay, did he teach you how to do that trick, how to make that woman float up? And
Well, I don't know that he specifically taught me that, but what he did teach me was presence, how to walk onto a stage and how to address an audience, how to look at an audience. And he taught me one thing that I don't think is being taught in this business anymore, and that is that you're out there to have a good time. And if you have a good time on that stage, you can't buy the tricks. You can go through the catalogs, you can go to the magic stores, and you can buy the equipment. But it's very much like a doctor buying a very expensive scalpel and marvelous, beautifully painted tanks of anesthetic and a lovely operating table, but not having any basic skill. And you wouldn't trust a doctor like that. It's his actual manner. You know, when people go to see an entertainer, they go to see the person. They don't go to see the tricks. They go to see the person. And I'd like to feel as an entertainer that no matter what I'm doing, the people would like to see what I'm doing and they'd like to see me. And I go out there to have a good time. And that's what Blackstone taught me. And that was the greatest lesson I could have learned from him.
Okay, there are a lot of magicians around, but what you do is really exceptional. How did you learn? If he didn't teach you the actual tricks, how did you learn to do all the things that you
Well, it's a matter of assimilation, I guess. You see, there aren't really any secrets between magicians. We know how each other's tricks are done. But it's, a magician will look at a certain routine that is done with the cards or little balls and cups or whatever, or walnut shells with the P underneath them, or the 3 cards or whatever. And he'll say, well, that I understand, but it's not something that I specialize in. It's like a singer has a certain number of songs that he or she sings. And magicians are very much the same way. I've specialized in the escape work. As you mentioned earlier, I've broken out of 28 jails to date, and another one coming up possibly in December if I play my cards right. The problem is not to get out, it's to get in. So you have to get permission to be locked up first and convince the chief of police that he too will benefit from the demonstration. And that being my specialty, there aren't many people who specialize in the escape act.
Right, okay, well, Harry Houdini was somebody that
Indeed.
did specialize. You are said to be the only person in the world that knows Harry Houdini's tricks.
No.
He died before you were born.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say, certainly I'm not the only person to know his tricks, because his tricks were, I think, fundamentally pretty well understood by other magicians, even during his lifetime. Maybe the exact construction of some of the equipment was not known. It certainly is known now. And the Houdini Museum up in Niagara Falls, Canada, of which I am the advisor, the main advisor for the museum, has all of his relics. It has the milk cans, the water torture cell, handcuffs, a couple of the straitjackets, most of his wardrobe and everything, and it's pretty well preserved what the old man did. Remember, he's been dead for over half a century, and we're still talking about him now.
Sensational. Okay, but you're doing all of those things. You mentioned the milk can. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you have done with the milk can?
Well, the milk can trick, as invented by Houdini, and he was responsible for inventing it, is essentially a large can which resembles a milk can, the standard can that they would ship maybe 100 gallons of milk in. It's filled with water to the top, or beer if you can afford it. And the magician is inserted, sometimes shackled, sometimes not, inserted into the can, and as he goes down beneath the top, the water, of course, overflows the top. Then the can lid is placed on. It's watertight, and as a matter of fact, when it goes on, you can actually see water squirt out. And it's placed on and locked on with 6 padlocks that are brought to the performance by, not by an associate, but by a locksmith or someone who's separated from the show, an independent individual, and they're locked on, and then a curtain is immediately dropped around it. Now, under the water like that, especially under those conditions of near panic, it should be possible for the average person to last about 1 1/4 minutes holding his or her breath. After about 2.5 minutes perhaps, the magician makes an emergence from behind the screen, and when the curtain goes up, the can is still there, still locked, and still has the water in it. And it's a heck of, I'll tell you, when I get into that can, Arlene, I'll be quite, in fact, I don't think I've ever said this on a television show before, but when I get into that can and my head goes beneath the surface and I hear clang as the lid goes on, everything goes black, there's an instant there where you say to yourself, what am I doing? I hope my mother doesn't find out I do this for a living. She thinks I sell dope, you know. I mean, here I am, locked in a can full of water, and there are otherwise intelligent people sitting out there, and I could be selling Tupperware and making just as much money. But at that moment, you really wonder what you're doing in the business. You really wondered for just a second. And then, as the thing develops and you're out of the can, you're ready to walk through the curtain, you say, I did it again. Once more, I did.
Okay, you're not going to tell us how you got out.
Yes, if you want to know. Do you want to know?
Yes, I do.
Very quickly and very well.
Okay, I didn't think
Enough
you were
said?
going to tell me. Enough said. Has your life ever been in danger with any of the
Yes.
things that you've done?
As a matter of fact, in Chicago, about 3 years ago, I actually got jammed in the can.
In the midnight?
And yeah, we know the reasons for it. It was my own carelessness again. You know, I always say to the young people that are in this business or getting into the business, I say, don't take any chances under any circumstances. Always be sure of what you're doing. And occasionally, I'm the one who's guilty of breaking that rule. And frankly, the whole thing jammed in such a way that I was trapped under the water. And remember, I can't take a breath underneath there. And yet Alexis was right outside. He was thoroughly instructed as to what to do, and when a certain number of seconds had gone by, he peeked inside and saw that I was in trouble. He burst through the curtains, and he saved my life, and without him, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, okay. How did you explain that to the audience?
Well, when they pulled up the curtain, I was out of the can, and it was all sealed up, of course. Actually, what had happened was the place where I'd fractured my back. When I went to make my escape from the can, there was a terrible noise. It sounded like a strawberry box breaking, that kind of a noise, and it really resounded through the water. You see, you get very good contact with the sound waves that way. And I knew that something was desperately wrong. I collapsed back inside the can, and I knew that I couldn't move, and I had to be actually taken from the can. I had to go into traction for about 3 hours afterwards. It was bad. I had opened a fracture in my back again. And it was my fault because I hadn't attacked it in exactly the right way.
Yeah.
So I take all blame for it.
Oh, we're glad you got out. While we're recovering from that story, we're going to take another commercial break right now. We're speaking with the amazing Randi, and we'll be right back with more about the amazing Randi after these messages. We're back with my guest, the amazing Randi. You just told us about one time that you almost died during your act. There was another time, was there not, when you were sealed in a coffin?
Yeah, that was in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. I was up doing my survival stunt. I've done several of these survival stunts. In fact, until recently, I was in the Guinness Book of World Records for a couple of them, but they've taken out dangerous stuff like this because kids try to emulate this, and I wouldn't have that under any circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in a coffin. I'd been sealed up at that time for something about an hour and a half and had a telephone line with me, and I was speaking to the people outside, and suddenly the telephone line parted. There was a big wrenching noise, and the coffin started to tilt, and there was a glass window like this, and I saw mud coming up over it. I was in the silt of the mud, and the tide was coming in, and what had happened is the coffin was in a couple of loops of cable, you see, and it had floated up a bit as the tide came in, and it had been doing this sort of thing, and gradually it worked out of the loop and started to fall into the silt. Now the silt is anywhere from 10 to 20 feet deep, and it's thin mud, and they had a diver there. I'm rather grateful they had a diver there, and they sent him down immediately, though I didn't know. I was out of touch, and all I could feel was I was sinking down into this. The pressure was getting greater, and suddenly I heard a terrible clanging noise, and he got a hold of me, and they hauled him up, holding on to me, and he got me back into the loop. And then they put a retaining rope around the other way, and I stayed down for the rest of the time.
Wow.
That was very close, very
okay,
close.
what a way to go.
Yes.
I mean, you were already in the coffin. It was convenient.
I could still, yes, I was already in the
I mean,
coffin. It was
that
very
was done.
neat and tidy, but, I would have liked to have been embalmed first, I suppose.
Right. Okay, well, you've been locked in other places. You've been locked in jail.
Yes.
You have gotten out of jail. You mentioned 28 times. Now, I would imagine if you can do it, why can't, for instance, a safecracker who's experienced with all these locks? I mean, is it so easy to break out of jail?
No, well, you must understand that a safecracker has his specialty. His specialty is opening safes from the outside to get what's inside. I've been locked up in safes many times and had some hairy experiences there, too. I don't have many hairy experiences, as you can see, but that was one of them. And I've been locked up inside a safe, and my business is being able to get out of a safe. It's an entirely different thing from getting into it.
Right.
You have to have an expertise, a specialty. You have to have a limited spectrum, but you've got to be very good at that particular spectrum.
Can you open any lock there is? That's
All I
made
can
today?
say is that I've opened any lock that I've come upon. Now, there's some that I have not tried, frankly. There's a lock called the Fichet, F-I-C-H-E-T, and if anyone wants a recommendation as to the best lock they can put on their home, it's a very expensive lock, but it's great. And I have, frankly, never even tried to open it because I know how the mechanism works, and it's one of those things that you sort of wake up in the middle of the night screaming about, saying, a Fichet lock. You know, they're going to do it with a Fichet lock. So now you know what my Achilles heel is, folks. So come at me with a Fichet and watch me fade.
Okay, you are a deputy sheriff in South Carolina.
I am indeed,
Yeah.
ma'am. And
Okay,
if
you've
you
never
drive
been.
through Sumter, South Carolina, you're in big trouble because I put my foot up on your running board whether you got it or not. And there's my card just to prove it. Deputy Sheriff, Sumter County, South Carolina. So there you go.
Okay, you got that because you broke out of their jail.
Well, that was Iberd Parnell, the sheriff there. He said, I'll give you my red hat and I'll make you a deputy sheriff if you break out of jail. 20 minutes later, I was standing there fully dressed, broken out of his jail. He put the hat on me immediately and said to his secretary, get me a deputy sheriff card, and he made it out right there. Man of his word.
Okay, I heard that they wanted to give you a key to the city, but they thought that would be ridiculous, so they gave you a lock
The
instead.
lockpick to the city, yes, a rather strange shaped thing, a giant lockpick this big.
Okay, you have traveled all over the world.
I have.
You were recently at the White House, actually when Ford was president, which wasn't such a long time ago. When you come home, we mentioned it is a very special place in Rumson, New Jersey. You have a home, I think, that all the people in the area talk about. There are artifacts because you have gathered things from all over the world, particularly Peru, skeletons, animals, secret doors, and lots of love. You have taken people in. There is currently a young musician living with you now. You've had a talented mime and an
Yes.
aspiring magician. Why have you taken all these people into your home? You support them, you help them, they live with you. That's a wonderful thing to do.
Well, Arlene, when I was a kid, and even before I had my accident where I was done up in a cast, I had a lot of people did a lot of things for me. They fed me when I was hungry. They put money in my pocket when there wasn't any there. I had to support myself, as you know, walking around in a cast, a very cumbersome thing, painting signs, something I knew nothing about at all, but I learned how to do it. I had a very hard time, and a lot of people did the Good Samaritan Act with me. And one gentleman named Walter Spain, elderly gentleman at that time, I knew his son. He took me into his home, and he did a lot of things for me, and he wouldn't even take thank you for it. And one day, he told me, it was about a week before he died of a stroke, and he told me something I've never forgotten. I said to him, Mr. Spain, I said, you've done an awful lot for me. And I said, you really saved my bacon several times. I really wish I could do something for you. And he just turned to me rather gruffly, because he was very shy about having done this, and he said, all I have to do is remember this. Do it for somebody else someday. And that was it. He turned back to his paper, ruffled it, and dismissed me by that. And a week later, he was no longer with us. And I've always felt very strongly about that. And I sort of think that every now and then you come upon somebody, and I've come upon many somebodies down through the years, who really just need somebody to reach out and say, hey, I care enough. I can be your friend for as long as you need it. And I've done it for several people now, and it's not a very noble thing to do. It's just something I feel I have to do. And I enjoy it because the rewards are enormous. I've got Loyal James. Oh, I've got some, I could start naming them off.
Yeah.
All the people are now professionals. They're out there, and I see them on television. I say, hey, I had some little thing to do with doing that.
A big
It's
thing to do.
wonderful.
It was a noble thing to do. We have to do another thing. We have to take a break, and we'll be right
That's a
back.
noble thing, yes.
Okay, that's not noble, but what you did is noble. We will be right back. We're speaking with the amazing Randi, so please stay right there. We're back with my guest, the amazing Randi. You are amazing. You've done so many things. In addition to your magical act, you've also written 3 books.
That's right.
Including science fiction. Okay.
Yeah.
I just recently read a science fiction article that you wrote, and in it, it's about a magician, and in it you say,
Yeah.
okay, now this is fiction.
Yeah.
One of the characters, a magician called the Great Rumson, by the way, states, people who enter this profession are misfits, unable to find a proper fit with the rest of humanity. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. I think people in show business in general are sort of that way. They're out of step somehow. They march to a different drummer, if you want to put it that way. There are people who need this getting out in front of people and saying, look what I can do, kind of thing. They need that, and particularly people in the magic profession, in the conjuring profession. I think they use it to adjust. And they're very well-adjusted people once they get into the trade. But without that, I think a lot of them would be very ill-adjusted to meeting society and dealing with society.
Okay, you're talking about them. I'm talking about you in particular.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I was a very
okay.
shy kid, remember, and too shy, very embarrassed to meet people, and blushing and stammering and whatnot.
Okay.
And I've gotten over that, you see.
Yeah, I see, and I'm delighted that you have. As I mentioned, you've written 3 books. One of them is called Flim Flam,
It
which
is
we
indeed.
happen to have a copy here. Okay, you are an amazing man, and there are so many things you've done. And one of the things that you're doing now is based on that book, Flim Flam. You are going around exposing the people who you believe are frauds and psychic phenomena. You are going to come back, right? You promised,
will.
okay?
Promise.
And we're going to talk about Flim Flam and the work
I
that
certainly
you've been
will.
doing there. And okay, thank you for being a
See you
guest
then.
on my show. I hope that you've enjoyed meeting the amazing Randi. I know that I certainly have, and that I hope that you join us again next week. Meantime, good night. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you. Okay. My name is Arlene Herson. The name of the show is Getting to Know You, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Tonight, we're going to get to know a master of illusion, a man who admits to being a charlatan, making you believe you see something that is not really there. He admits what he does is magic, a trick designed to fool you. What makes him angry are those who claim what he knows to be false is real. The people who say they can read minds, move objects, and bend spoons with psychic powers. He says it can't be done, and is devoting his life to exposing the frauds who claim to have special powers as a result of psychic phenomena. He is the amazing Randi, and let's get to know him. Welcome.
Why not?
Okay, we are delighted to have you here again.
I'd like to tell your audience, first of all, they saw our last program. I'm wearing the same trousers. Now, I don't know how this happens. It must be a psychic miracle. But I do have other trousers, folks. They don't all have patches in the knees like this. When I work at home, I often dress in tails and tucks and terrible things like that. So I only have 2 kinds of clothes, either extremely elegant or like this.
Right. Well, I like the patches. I think they fit in fine. But it's because you're so busy with the new work that you're doing, you probably don't have time to shop. And the new work that you're doing is exposing the people who you call frauds in the psychic phenomena field, parapsychology, psi, whatever the whole, all of it in a nutshell. Why are you doing that?
Well, I'll tell you, Arlene, when I was a kid, I was about 15 or so, and I was first getting interested in conjuring, magic, if you will. Some friends of mine and myself took a trip off to a spiritualist church up in Canada. It was called the Assembly of Inspired Thought, and I'll never forget that. And we saw a man up there doing tricks, pretending that he was reading the contents of sealed envelopes by holding it to his forehead. And he was doing stuff right out of the catalog. He was doing the kind of thing that my friends and I knew was strictly trickery. There was nothing supernatural about it. And he had elderly people, particularly elderly people, in that congregation there with the tears running down their faces, really believing that he was talking with the dead. And of course he wasn't. It was all tricks, and I got very angry at that. And yet at the age of 15, we went 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and on one of the performances I stood up and I told the audience exactly what he was doing, and I was right. And he called a policeman, had me arrested. My parents had to come and get me at the police department because I was disturbing a religious meeting, and he was within his rights to stop me from doing so. And I thought to myself, well, one of these days I'll have enough authority, ability, and the know-how to get around these things and be able to tell them exactly as they are, and that's exactly what I've been doing.
Okay, you knew it was magic. You knew it wasn't real, and he
Right.
said what he was doing had to do with psychic powers that
That's
he had.
right.
You know, just about what made you decide to be a magician? What made you decide to be a conjurer?
Difficult thing to answer, but as we discussed before, I was very shy as a kid, and I had to really do something. I had to get out on a stage. I had to face up to this terrible challenge, and the challenge was to get in front of people to do something very difficult to do. And the most difficult thing I could think to do was to perform miracles. And that's what I got up and did. I went out and joined a carnival and got up in front of people as Prince Ibis, did a mind-reading act and produced the ladies out of boxes and whatnot, and did impossible things under very difficult circumstances. It wasn't easy to do. But once I started to do it, and once I was well into it, it became much easier, of course.
Yeah, and now you can spot all of the people that aren't
Oh,
doing
yes.
it correctly.
Oh, yes.
You're a founding member of the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims for the Paranormal. What is that?
It's a very unwieldy title, first of all. CSICOP is a committee that consists of very prominent scientists and one lone magician who got together back in 1975 to found this committee. And our purpose is not to debunk, it's not to belittle, it's not to forbid or to refuse to investigate these things. It is to investigate claims of the paranormal. Now, our main source of irritation, and my source of irritation in my latest book, is scientists who say that they are using real scientific methods in order to investigate these things. They are, in most cases, people who are in other fields, sociology or physics or chemistry or some such thing, mechanical engineers and whatnot, people who just don't understand how magicians work, and yet they get fooled by the likes of Uri Geller and Ted Sarios and other psychics, and Dorothy Allison and the rest of them.
Okay, well, your book, which we happen to have a copy of here
Yes,
now,
indeed we do.
okay, which we can show the, which now we can show the audience because now it's available. You will
That's
be
right.
able to buy that in your bookstores, but however, it was a long time coming. You had trouble having it released.
Yes,
Why?
I spent a year and a half after the book was actually completed in manuscript form trying to talk the lawyers of the publishers into believing what I was saying. Finally, I had to produce all of my documents. And they would call me in. It was really rather comical because they'd call me in and they'd say, now the man couldn't have said and done this. I'd produce the documents, they'd look them over, get on the phone, check with the people who made the documents, and hang up the phone and say, you were right, he did this incredible thing. Such things as forging documents in order to prove their points in scientific experiments, writing letters that the people whose name appeared at the bottom had never even known about, giving false evidence and everything, lying, cheating, conniving in order to produce evidence that they had produced their experiments under proper conditions, and of course they hadn't.
Okay, the book challenges all of that.
It does indeed.
Okay. You mention in the book that you will give $10,000.
That's right.
Okay, as a, who are you going to give $10,000 to? What is the prize?
I always have to sort of summarize this because the offer is that I will give $10,000 to any person who can perform one psychic, supernatural, occult, whatever, feat under proper observing conditions. Now, this is a pretty safe offer to make because these people never want to really be looked at carefully. They would rather tell you anecdotal information, like Dorothy Allison, the police psychic, does. She insists on telling you about the 13 supposed cases in which she's been so successful. When you really investigate them, you find out they didn't happen that way at all. She found a boy, I believe from Monmouth County, but I'm not too sure. That's in my records. I haven't done a section on her in the book because the book is running too long. But my next book, probably Son of Flim Flam, I don't know, will certainly have that information in it. And Dorothy Allison, for example, when she tried to find this young man, she said he was dead and his body would be found near an airport. What actually turned out to be the facts of the matter was that he had joined the Hare Krishna group and was found in the Pan Am building in New York City. And we said, well, Dorothy, you're wrong, because he's not only alive, but he wasn't found in an airport. She says, but Pan Am is owned by Pan American Airways, and that is an airline, and the boy was effectively dead. Once he joined the Hare Krishnas, emotionally, he was dead. And this is what they count as a hit.
Okay, yeah, what you're saying is you can rationalize anything.
Exactly.
Just for our audience, Dorothy Allison is a psychic who the police have called in, particularly in Atlanta, where so many young children have been murdered. They have called her in that case, but she supposedly has been called in many other cases and has been successful. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that when we get back, because now we're going to take a break. We're speaking with the amazing Randi, the author of Flim Flam, and we'll be right back after these messages. Stay right there. We're back with my guest, the amazing Randi. We were just speaking about a particular psychic, Dorothy Allison, who has been called in to find missing bodies. But the police have been using psychics now, it seems. It's come out for a long time.
Yes,
do you
they
believe
have.
that there could be any truth in it, that they actually can?
There could be, but there isn't, unfortunately, because a chap named Milton Reisner, I think his name was, is a psychologist with the Los Angeles Police Department. He got some funding from the federal government and from that police department, and he spent 2 years doing research. He asked this basic question: have psychics been of any assistance to police forces? Now, there are psychics, Peter Herkos, you've got Irene Hughes, Dorothy Allison, all kinds of them. They're all over the place, and they keep on yakking in the National Enquirer and the Midnight Globe, so it's got to be so, we know that, about how successful they've been. They've been finding bodies left and right. They stumble over them all the time in their psychic dreams. Well, this man, the psychologist, came to the conclusion that they were of no use whatsoever. Their technique consists of making a great number of statements about nothing specific, just about everything in general. They say, I see an airport, I see wet, I see the figure 4, I see a newspaper, a crumpled up newspaper, a comic, I see Donald Duck, I see flowers, and they go on and on and on and on like this, and eventually some of these things are going to fit into the crimes when they are eventually solved. Now, one thing that Allison did, for example, I believe it was Allison, I may be wrong on this, they were looking for a particular man. They knew his name. It was a peculiar name, started with Z, if I recall correctly, and she said, put me into the squad car, drive up this street, drive down that street. She drove them all over town. She said, stop here, go in that house. She didn't say he was in there. She said, go in that house. And when they charged up to the door, guns drawn, these idiot policemen, burst open the door, guess who was there? The man's brother lived at that address. But the man wasn't there. Now, all she had to do was go to the phone book and look up that name, come upon that address, and pretend she was getting a psychic impression by driving up and down the streets until they came. Now, the chances were very small, but possibly, that he might be there. And they counted it as a miracle, because how could she possibly know his brother lived in that house? It was in the phone book, friends. But they don't look at that kind of thing as a solution, you see.
Okay, you don't believe that the psychics can find
No.
murderers for, but
Let
now
me say
what?
this, though,
Okay.
and pardon me for interrupting you. When you say I don't believe, I don't say that there's no such thing. I have never said that. And the fact that I can duplicate the tricks of the psychics doesn't mean they do them that way. But it is far more rational to believe, as I've always pointed out in everything I've ever written on this subject, it is more rational to believe that it's done by trickery and that it cannot be done than to believe that it can be done. I don't say it can't be.
Okay, well, a lot of people believe it can be. Do
Oh, yes,
you believe?
indeed.
A lot of people believe that they have extrasensory
Extrasensory.
perception.
Yes.
Do you believe that it's possible for people to
I
have
always say that
extrasensory
it's possible, but it's also possible for the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus to be real. Now, you laugh at that
Okay.
because we do not accept that in our culture as being reality. But we accept far more improbable things than that reindeer can fly. You can get up and throw reindeers off roofs of houses all over the place and have a lot of broken up reindeer. But they say, keep on trying. Some reindeer can fly. That's going to be very hard on reindeer. But you cannot prove a negative. You can't prove reindeer can't fly. You can show that any reindeer you test can't fly. That's what I'm doing with the psychics. My offer for $10,000 is open to anyone watching this program, anyone, any place in the world, in any country. And I've traveled all over the world twice, offering this check, waving it in the air and saying, this check is yours. When we were in Australia just recently, a few weeks ago, the prize was actually up to $50,000 and eventually $100,000 because some wealthy people there got in and offered their money along with mine. Not one of the 200 people who applied were able to take it.
Okay, give us an example of some of the people who have applied. What kind of powers have they claimed to have?
Well,
and what kind of tests have you
we're
put
speaking
them
of Australia. Now, just recently, this is fresh in my memory, we tried dowsers, diviners, people to take the fork stick and run around trying to find water underground. They say they can. We set up a test with 10 pipes in the ground. At random, one of the pipes was chosen, suppose it was number 3, and we turned on the valves in number 3. Said, there's now water traveling in number 3. Show us that it works. And they'd travel from 10 all the way up to 3, boom, the rod would dip, and on 2 and 1 it didn't, and 4, 5, 6 all the way down. But on 3 it would dip. So then, after that, we blinded them, put them behind the trolley that we had there, and we turn on the tap in another one, chosen at random. We couldn't choose it from our own heads. It might be 3 again. We don't know. We choose a counter from a bag. Turn that on, and they tried 10 times in a row. Most of them said they would be 100% successful. All of them said they would be at least 80% successful. What we found out at the end of the day, after 520 tests, Arlene, that's a lot of tests in one day, from dawn until dusk, 520 tests, we found out that the expected rate of success would be 10%, 1 in 10. 10%. They got 13.4%. in a controlled scientific test. And that is not the least bit significant, especially when they claim 80 to 100% success. And when we asked them afterwards what had happened, they said, oh, we still believe in dowsing. Why do you believe in dowsing? Because there's obviously something wrong with the test. You see, they never throw out the theory, they throw out the evidence. And then we found one gentleman who said that he'd been 100% successful. We said, well, how can you explain that? He said, because when I fail completely, I don't count those tests, because that's when the dowsing isn't working. What kind of reasoning is that? That's not scientific.
Okay. Do you believe in astrology?
Of course not. That's the most basic,
Okay,
fundamental
yeah.
claptrap of all.
What kind of advice would you give to the people who consult their daily horoscopes in the newspaper every day?
It's very simple. Simply don't. Because, for example, now I'm supposed to be a Leo. August the 7th is my birth date. Oh, I told everybody. August the 7th is my birthday. You can send gifts if you'd like. And that's supposed to be smack in the middle of Leo. Now, what does it mean to be, do you know, for example, what does it mean to be
No.
born in a sign?
I don't.
You see,
No,
what it
right,
means is
okay,
the sun was in your sign at the time that you were born. Now, that would be during the day, of course. The sun would be located in that sign of the zodiac. Actually, the sun on August the 7th is not located in Leo. It was 2,500 years ago when these rules were made up, but due to a thing called precession of the equinoxes, Carl Sagan will be glad to tell you about that. Actually, I was born in the sign of Cancer, in the west end of the sign Cancer, so I'm not a Leo at all. So people who are born in the middle of some sign are actually born in the west end of the sign before, but they don't know that. Does it make any difference? It should make a
does
great
it?
deal of
Okay.
difference.
Well, I was born in the sign of Cancer too, so that's kind of nice.
So you were born in the sign before that?
You had an astrology column or a show or whatever at one time.
Yes.
That was a fake, did you not?
Yeah, I was Zoran. That was my name.
Yeah.
And what I did was, just for a lark, when I was a kid, I was, I guess about 17, 18 at the time, some friends of mine started a newspaper. If I had known what was going to happen to that newspaper, now it's the Midnight Globe. It was called Midnight in those days. I made up the original masthead for it. I did the artwork for that. It's now been dropped many years, and it started in Montreal. And I actually took an astrology magazine, cut it up into little scraps, shuffled them all up in a hat, and then with rubber cement, I would just take them out and glue them up and put one under, after each sign. And I saw people snapping this up in the street, and Zoran was the most marvelous astrologer. It was all arrived at by random means, and I really got let down when I was sitting after we watched the edition come off onto the streets and we saw people picking it up. This team of little girls were opening up the paper. They were office girls, and opening up and saying, "Oh, it's so correct. Oh, this is wonderful." And I looked at them and I thought, "Oh, no, there's no hope for the human race." And I gave it up at that point.
Okay, because Zoran was a fake.
Yes,
okay.
he sure
But
was.
Randi is real, and I'm glad you're here, and we have to take another break right now. We're speaking with the amazing Randi, and we'll be right back after these messages, so please stay right there. We're back with my guest, the amazing Randi. In speaking about the different people that you doubt, the different people that you've exposed, one of the first psychics that you exposed actually was Uri Geller. He claims to be able to do many things, including bend spoons and fix clocks and bend keys, and you even wrote a book called The Magic of Uri Geller as Revealed by the Amazing Randi.
Right.
Okay, is he really a fake?
Oh, yes, he's a comedian, nightclub magician from Israel, who in Israel was even exposed on television. He did a program, and some students stood up in the audience and went forward and did exactly the same act, pointed out who the Confederates were in the audience, and he uses people sitting in the front row that travel with the show, and they give him the signals with the code, as a matter of fact, is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes on like that to signal digits and whatnot. It's a very simple thing. It's a mediocre magic act, but if you believe it's real, then of course it's a miracle.
Okay, well that's how he can guess different numbers, but how about the bending of the spoons? How about the bending of the keys? I mean,
Well,
that's not an easy feat.
well, it was a trick that was being done by school children in Tel Aviv when he came back from where was it? I can't think of where it was now. Cyprus, pardon me. Cyprus. He was getting his education on the island of Cyprus, and when he came back to Tel Aviv, the kids in high school, you know, everyone in high school does a stunt, like eating goldfish or cramming into a Volkswagen or a phone booth or whatever. And they were doing the spoon and fork bending trick. And as a matter of fact, the restaurants in Tel Aviv had signs up saying, if you bend the cutlery, you pay for it. And they went to plastic knives and spoons and forks for a while. So it was a trick that he learned from the kids. And he came to America. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, ex-astronaut, was so impressed with him that he brought him to the United States and then all around the rest of the world and displayed him to everybody. And he was just a simple magician doing simple conjuring tricks.
Okay, we happen to have some spoons and keys. You
That's what this
said,
is?
right, that's what this, in a sealed envelope, okay, and in here.
Where did you get the spoons from, or who got them?
I brought the spoons.
From your own home?
Okay, yes.
I hope they're
Yes,
good ones.
no, well, as a matter
Real
of fact.
silver?
Do you want to?
I hope you didn't bring real silver. 'cause
Okay,
that'd
as
be
a
waste.
matter of fact, if you really want to know the truth, I did buy these spoons specially because I knew that you might put them in such a way that I couldn't bring them home and use them again. So I have spoons here and I have keys here. You say you can do what, Randy?
And you sealed them all up?
What, you're
All
yelling?
right.
Yes, right.
May
okay.
I?
Yes, please.
All right. Can I try the envelope, or do you have two of them? It
Please go.
says Future Vision right on the envelope, so, we got three of them. Well, our cup runneth over. Now, what's the X? Oh, the X. You marked them with X's, I presume, so that you'd know them in the
Correct.
future. All right.
I want to know my
Fine.
spoons.
Let's take,
Okay.
take an average. They're all the same, aren't they? What does it say
They're all
on
the
there? Can you read what it says on there? What does it say? Does it say?
It says Walco Stainless Korea.
So it's made in Korea, and it's stainless. All right, I'm going to ask that the camera get an extreme close-up on this. Now, here's what we're going to do. Would you hold the spoon between your fingers like that, pinch it at either end like that for me, okay? Not like this,
Wait.
at either end, like that,
Okay.
okay? And I'm going to hold it. In fact, I'll move my hand around to this side.
okay.
Now, if we can get an extreme close-up on this, what I'm going to do is, oh, that's a good close-up. I'm just going to stroke it. Put your elbows against your body, Arlene, so that you'll get a little more leverage. It's less tiring that way. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wiggle it like this, and you will get the impression. Hold on to it very lightly now. You're holding it. I can see your fingers getting white, so I just want you to hold on
It's
very,
like
very lightly.
feel
Doesn't it appear as if it's getting flexible?
It sure does.
It looks rubbery, doesn't it?
It sure
Let go of
feels
it for a
it.
second.
I
Let go.
don't-
I'm going to show you something. I'm just going to
Okay.
hold it right in this position. Now, I'm going to leave it so you can see the X on it. Look at this. Look, look, look. It's getting liquid.
Oh my God almighty.
Heavens to Betsy, is there no end to the man's
I
talent?
don't
Look at this.
believe it. I mean, these are spoons that I just bought. I mean,
Now,
they
take
are,
one of them between your hands. Now, bend it.
Okay.
Actually, try to bend and break it by any force that you want to. Go ahead. Just
Okay.
by brute force.
You know,
Go ahead.
actually,
If
I
you
had.
can.
Oh,
I don't
I
know
can
if
bend
you
it.
can.
Well,
Well, go ahead.
but
Try
they're
to
not the
bend it and
most
break it.
expensive.
See if you
Oh,
can.
you mean to break it?
Yes, actually try to bend it and break
it.
it. Yeah. Go ahead. See if you can.
I can bend it.
Well,
Oh,
try
wait,
bending
wait.
it back now. See if
Okay.
it'll break in any way. Is there any way you can
No,
break it?
no, I can't
But
break
you
it.
see, the pressure I put on it was very, very
Yeah.
minuscule, wasn't it? Very, very light.
I can't believe it.
And yet this kind of trick, when a man like Uri Geller does it, he says that it's the real thing. And of course it isn't. It's a simple trick that any 12-year-old child can learn.
Well, I don't know about that. All right, I am absolutely amazed, I have to tell you. All right, now.
We have keys.
Well, oh, we have
Well,
keys, yes.
Do we have time? I presume we have
Yes,
time.
we have time for the keys.
All right, let's just take a, what are these keys for, may I ask?
Well, I'll tell you what they're for during the commercial because we're going to do it when we get back.
Oh, fine, I better put these down and I won't touch them then, okay?
Okay.
All right.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
And
with
I won't touch those
Amazing
keys.
Randy. I will see that he doesn't
Okay.
touch the keys, and so stay right there. We're back with my very special guest, the Amazing Randy. Now, just before we left, Randy did not touch the keys. He was going to show us a key trick. I give you my word of honor that he didn't do anything to those keys. Now, you can do something to the
Would
keys.
you buy a used car from this woman? That's all I want to know. All right, now the keys, that I just took one off the chain, and I'm going to, let me see. We'll take two of different colors, if you don't mind. They're getting hot under these lights. This is brass, and this is, well, plated brass, I suppose, but it's silver colored. And as a matter of fact, in order to have a flat surface, perhaps would you hold that for me?
Sure.
Okay, now the idea is that we want to have a flat surface so we can demonstrate that they are perfectly flat. Am I correct?
Correct.
Now, do you recognize what these keys are for? That's the problem.
Well, I know. I know that they're to open doors. Do I have to know the specific
No,
door
well,
that
for
they're
example,
to open?
this is a car key, the one that
Right.
says fits Ford cars, so we know
Right,
that it's got to be a
okay.
car key, all right?
Correct.
Now, you recognize that one. Do you recognize this brass one, for example?
Right.
Do you know what that is for, or what it was
Yes.
for at one time?
Yeah, it's for-
So, in
for
other
a
words, you
door.
know that it's yours, that it's not...
Right. Oh, yes,
Okay, fine.
absolutely, of course.
Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm just going to ask you, I'll hold this edge of the book. If you just put this finger right there on the tip of the key.
This
Now,
finger.
let's get into an extreme close-up here. Oh, we have a close-up. Good. Okay, hold it tightly now. And I'm just going to rub on here, and I want you to tell, I'll move my thumb aside there, I want you to tell the folks what you see happening. I'm not going to suggest anything to you. Beginning now, I believe.
I see the key bending. I really see the key bending. I'm not
Take your
kidding.
finger off now.
Okay.
Watch what happens. Look at this.
That key
It's getting
bent.
worse as we look at it. A miracle of a semi-religious nature, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, Randy, it would be very easy for you to convince me that this was something of a semi-religious nature. I mean, I am standing here watching you break a spoon. I see you don't have any tricks up your sleeves. I held onto this while you bent it. It is bent. I mean, there's no question about the fact it's bent. I really could believe, if you told me that you had supernatural powers, I could believe you.
Well, I'll tell you something, Arlene. Now, bending a simple little key like this again is tricks, the kind of thing that a 12-year-old child with enough instruction can learn how to do. It is not a miracle. It is not psychic. It has nothing to do with psychics whatsoever. It's simply conjuring tricks. The fact that you don't understand how it's done is not terribly important because I don't expect any layperson is going to know, any person who's not trained in conjuring techniques or that sort of thing is going to know how it's done. I don't expect you to know.
Okay, wow, and you'd reproduce. Uri Geller also fixes clocks and does things that, could you, if somebody came to a clock, could you reproduce that?
Well, very
I
briefly,
don't have a
let's
clock
put it
here,
this
but
way.
that's-
It's not a case of whether he can fix clocks. What he says to his audience is he says, bring watches and clocks that are not working. Now, if he said broken watches and broken clocks in the first place, that would be a different matter altogether. Because if you bring him that sort of thing and hand it to him, he says, it's broken, I can't fix it. But when people bring any kind of a watch or clock that is not running at the moment, they bring it to him, naturally, if they start to move it at all, or even warms up from the warmth of the hands, the lubricating oil inside softens up, and it starts to tick. But that doesn't mean it's going to keep going. So there's a big difference, of course, you see.
Okay, and we can read all about it in your book, The Magic of Uri Geller, as
can.
revealed by the amazing Randy.
One further miracle. Put your finger on
Okay.
the end of the key. Let's try again and see whether we can get a further result. Let's turn it that way, and let's get an extreme close-up of this now if we can. Can we get an extreme close-up there? Let's move right in. Let's see if we get a better bend than we had before. Oh, this is remarkable. Let go of it now. Look at this. It's even worse now. Look at, oh, it's getting worse, folks. This lady will never be able to go home again. She has to move out of her apartment altogether.
Right. Do you know something? This was the key to the front door of my house, but however, I have recently changed the lock and I felt it was safe.
I'm glad
I
of
had a
that.
feeling you were going to do something to it. Just, why did you write a book about Uri Geller?
I had to, because he was getting to a lot of people. He was making a younger generation particularly believe that there are such things that go bump in the night, as I say. Uri Geller is a comedian and a nightclub magician from Israel who came over here and fooled an awful lot of people and went around the world. After my book, The Magic of Uri Geller, came out, he effectively went downhill from that point on. Now that my new book, Flim Flam, is out and it's available in the bookstores, I hope that a lot of people, particularly young people, are going to read it so that they will be able to make up for their minds for themselves as to whether these things are real or not. The evidence is there.
Right, okay, and you're spending a lot of time in proving that
indeed.
these things aren't real, because really you don't want people to be fooled. You want to say, hey, go be
I have to do
entertained
it.
and not be fooled.
It's
And
a compulsion I have, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I thank you very much. You fooled me in a couple of things you did, but I loved it, and I thank you very much for being a guest on my show. I hope that you've enjoyed meeting the amazing Randi. I know that I certainly have, and I hope that you'll join us again next week. Meantime, good night. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.